Hey, it's gluten-free beer Brian, and I am here with Bob from Divine Science Brewing in California. Divine Science is 100% gluten-free. So Bob, what is going on today?
Not much, just having a Sunday. It's been a busy last couple months, really, getting the tap room and everything ready to go. We've been doing soft openings like the last 2 weeks, and we're next time we do a soft opening, we're going to try to have food. I know that that's a big, attractor, and also, reason to stay longer. So,
Right.
yeah.
Well, you got to eat a little sometimes when you're
Well, and
having a couple.
there's nothing wrong with having a nice gluten-free snack with a beer.
Right. Tacos.
Tacos. I think we're thinking about like pretzels, maybe.
Oh, that'd be so good.
Dominique's actually in the background making some donuts right now.
Nice.
So I'm really excited about those.
Oh, that'd be nice. That'd be awesome. So tell us a little bit about your brewery, brew pub. Are you like aiming to always serve food? Or are you just going to do food trucks?
Probably food trucks. I mean, in California, you can either have a kitchen and cut a hole in the ceiling, or you can have prepackaged food. So we'll probably do prepackaged because you could pre-bake pretzels, say, in advance and then bag each one individually, and then serve different customers. So, I think that's kind of the thought process, at least at this point. It's really expensive just even getting open, right? So I think that's been the focus right now, and then, kind of build it from there. That's really kind of how we've done everything, is bootstrapped from the ground up, right? Funded the first couple batches with, money that I was making from my day job, right? And then it's kind of gone there, right? To the point that, last couple months, I'm actually full-time in the beer business right now.
Right. And that's amazing. you made the transition that, so many homebrewers dream of.
It's crazy. Well, you have to start somewhere. And I think that was the thing is, the first couple of years, just trying to learn stuff, you're reinvesting everything that you make into the business. And then you have to start learning how to, do that larger economic equation in order to price stuff, right? I mean, you hear a lot of the pioneers also talk about this too, like Groundbreaker, I think, is one of the ones that I've, listened to or heard them talking about, right? When they talked about making an affordable pint of beer and putting it in a can, that is an entirely different equation than just having something to drink, like reclaiming an otherwise off limits beverage, right?
Right.
So, I mean, I remember my first crazy batches, like I did a Belgian stout that was like 12% or something crazy like that. And it was like, for 5 gallons, it cost me like $150.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And
then that's not feasible as a business model.
Yeah. You're like, I don't know if I could actually sustain that with the cost. And that's just even on like a 5-gallon batch, right? How do you do 500 gallons, right? And have it cost you enough that you can still make money on it.
Right. Yeah, because you've got to have, a business has to make money to keep the doors open and
I mean,
pay the bills.
For every dollar that's going out, 2 has to come back in, or else we're not gonna stay around. So that's been the thing, really learning that. I think that took a second to really grasp that, and to just really understand how to position ourselves, right? I think that any gluten-free brand, you're like, we're gluten-free. What else is there to say? But then there's competition now. There's other gluten-free brands. There's ciders. There's other things that have filled that void for so long that when you present it, oftentimes people aren't even ready to accept it. So you have to be consistent. You have to be constantly putting out good stuff, and get
it into the hands of the consumer so that they're going in and asking for it.
I would say that we would be nowhere without the people that have been those loyal customers from the start, right? I've really made the difference, and we really appreciate our local Californians, and all the people that have put us on, right? I mean, we've gotten so many shares and story posts from people that, you know, have just gone out and bought our beer and then just shared it on their social, right? And that's huge, right? Is that, you know, they always talk about on Shark Tank the cost of customer acquisition, right? And you know, there's a lot of cost in making beer, but there's also those incredible value that the people that enjoy your stuff. I mean, you know, that's limitless joy for a brewer, you know,
right?
Because that's what it was all about, is bringing something to people who in very many markets in California are absolutely deprived. So, you know, that's been something that I just, you know, I get out of bed every morning because of that.
That's awesome. I've got, I think you, see if we can get that in focus. Yeah, webcams are so great. Beer Divin. So tell us about this. And I'm gonna open this thing up. Is that cork gonna like hit the ceiling?
I don't know. I mean, we'll see. I mean, it's probably been, you know, got a good churning from the transit. So yeah, I'm very excited to see.
It's had a few days. It's been in the fridge since Thursday.
I've had one or two that have gotten that full on champagne boom, right, which is just the most beautiful sound in the world.
Right. So this I'm looking around for something. Like, I'll be right back. I'm gonna grab something just in case.
Okay, for sure. Well, I guess while he's going, or I don't know if he gets to edit this or not, I will pour myself a Divine Milsner. Let's see if I can get her in focus. Hi. The inspiration for the artwork is very Pink Floyd driven, if anybody's seen one or two of their posters. And the taste is very bohemian, as I think that old rock style really set itself apart from many others. And I would definitely describe that Pink Floyd element as very bohemian. So what better than a bohemian Pilsner?
Ooh, that's
or shall I say
clear.
Pilsner?
The Milsner. I love that beer.
Yes, I was just giving the people that were watching. I don't know if you're going to do this on without an edit or not, but I was just giving a talk about the Milsner. Yeah, those things are in there. Those things are in there. Those are Belgian corks, right? So
right. Might take the rest of our time here for me to get it open.
Right.
I think it's wiggling. Come on.
Yeah, I had to do one. I had to remove one with like a screwdriver last night.
I might go grab the. I'm gonna go grab
a wine opener does work too.
Yeah.
Let's see if we can get some of this donut making action in the background going on. No, just the napkins. Let's see, wait. There's Dominique. So are you doing donut balls?
It says 40 grams.
40 grams. Oh wait, they're gonna rise. Gotcha. All right. Here we go.
See if I can get some mechanical advantage working for me.
Yeah, true. And yeah, and if you don't go all the way through the cork, you probably still get a pop. So maybe even if you go all the way through, I wonder, because it is, you know, the cork is such a really cool material that expands and contrasts in such interesting ways. You getting it?
Where's to come loose? It's getting there.
Yeah, maybe just pulling it out outright. Oh, hey.
Shredded the cork. Making me work for this beer.
Right.
I think I'm going to need a beer after getting this beer open.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's good. You know, with all that effort, at least you get a beer out of it. So.
Right. Exactly.
Well, there's definitely a note for next time. You know, the Belgian cork we got, or because that was what was available at the store. There's been actually.
Yeah.
Oh, we did it.
It's open.
Okay,
Ooh.
very good.
It's got kind of a like a sour, goozy kind of aroma
Yes.
to it.
Yes, this beer is very much inspired by lambic style ales. You know, in terms of the original, what we set out to do with, you know, a lot of the color that you get, which is kind of this almost amberish. It looks really clear on your end.
Yeah, it's pretty clear, very well carbonated.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can see, it's a nucleated glass. So it is just like streaming bubbles up off the bottom.
Wow.
It's got
super
the
cool.
laser etched nucleation points.
Nice. Yeah, I think that's a wonderful glass to drink that beer in.
Mm-hmm.
Well, tell me what you're getting. Describe it for the audience.
My nose is, it's winter here in Michigan. My nose is pretty shot.
So this beer actually started as a homebrew project, really, that was then scaled with the wild bacteria that I had gathered over the years in two of my fermentation vessels. And
Okay.
so from there, you know, I basically just poured that, you know, resting liquid of, you know, wild bacteria and yeast into a larger vessel and let that sit with a nice wort on it that had a little bit of the red sorghum that I got from you. It had some rice, some millet, and some buckwheat as well in combination. And, you know, it really was just kind of a base brew. There wasn't really too much going on. I think we did a couple random hops that I think you had sent me in there, but nothing too much, because of that fact that I didn't want to mess up with the bacteria. Right.
Yeah, it's very like light bodied, very lively carbonation, which kind of just gives it that real light. I mean, like, you just drink this very quickly if one wanted to.
Very true. Yeah, and that's, you know, one of the things that I found was really interesting is that
relatively dry, but it's still got a nice malty character to it.
I think the millet and the buckwheat really combine well in this recipe to give a good backbone to an otherwise rather light and effervescent experience. And there is a lot of that malt sweetness that does, I think, balance some of that acidity that you get from the wild bacteria.
Yeah, it's not like overly sour. I wouldn't be like, oh my God, you know, I got like a real nice, you know, sour note right when I opened the bottle, but it's not overpowering, you know, and I like it.
Awesome. Well, that's always good feedback. I appreciate that. We plan to do further versions of this beer because, you know, yeast and bacteria never sleep, right? So even on some of the bottles, like I think like in the first couple of weeks right after it had conditioned, I even had gotten a little bit of a sourdough note, but not, you know, I'm not saying like not too much of that armpit, not too much of that other stuff that you can get from those more barnyard styles. And something that's been interesting to me is I almost get a slight, like more of a ripe Granny Smith in terms of the tartness level, right? As opposed to, say, a younger Granny Smith apple, right? A newer Granny Smith apple, you're gonna get more like that malic acid and a lot more of those tangy and tart notes. This is more subdued. It has a little bit more of a developed, you know, a sweet backbone still, which I found really interesting. You know, in sampling it, you know, it's always tough to say. It's like, when is it ready to bottle? Well, technically, whenever the brewer is ready to put it in the bottle.
As long as it's done fermenting.
Right. I mean, that beer sat for 7 months with the pellicle on it.
Oh wow.
So and right at the first when I first started, recognizing the pellicle and then investigating it, I was getting like Sauvignon Blanc notes on the nose. I was getting some like a little bit of sour cherry at first, and that flavor has thoroughly developed past that, which is just probably one of the interesting things. I'm thinking about doing different batches and blending them over the years, almost in that lambic style, right? So this is technically almost in and of itself could be considered a Guza similarly, right? A Guza adjacent is what I'd really more call it, right? But with that similar inspiration, as it were. What a great beer to start with.
Oh, it's a nice beer. Getting some good, pretty good lacing on it. That's always a bit of a challenge with gluten-free.
That's true. And also I think, when you look at bacteria getting involved in a beer, and potentially eating out every, dextrin and that is in there, in addition to any other residual glucose and maltose, you could be really reducing a lot of that head retention just through that. So,
right, because bacteria will eat things that yeast won't.
True. I mean, my Milsner right here is still sitting with a nice little topper of foam too, and that's something that I always set out to do. We've really constructed our recipes with that in mind. It's something that always makes me have a callback to craft beer when I was a young 20-year-old drinking some of those frothy beverages.
Right.
So go ahead. What's up? Sorry.
I was like, you definitely want to have some kind of head retention, and you want it to look like beer and not just taste like it.
Who did I read it from? Somebody, it could have been a Papazian or somebody, is that good beer deserves a collar, a foam collar, right? And beer itself is operating off of a colloid. Those what is that, colloid physics or something like that? I don't know if it's physics or chemistry or something of that nature, where you basically have these proteins and protein bits in solution, working in conjunction with that alcoholic mixture you have. But even still, the higher ABV you go, oftentimes the alcohol itself is its own viscosity reducer, right? You look at still spirits, you could shake them and get bubbles, but there's no head retention.
It's just going to go away.
Yeah, exactly. But it is a good way for a bouncer to tell whether or not that water bottle is vodka or if it's water.
True. You sound like you have experience in this.
I had weird mentors as a kid. I guess that's what I'll say. So.
Okay, there's some good lighting.
Oh, hey, there we go. Yeah, I think your glass is rather thick, right? So it gives it an amber appeal. But the beer itself, I think, with also that, it does have a little bit of a lower acidity. I would say that's in like the low fours. Maybe high threes. But it, as you noticed, it doesn't have an overpoweringly acidic element.
Right. Yeah, it's not like those sour balls that we used to eat in middle school. Where you get
Warhead.
The pucker face and all of that. It's just a nicely kind of like mature sour. No.
True. Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely pleased with it. We want to try to be able to do more volume in years to come. This was only a 15-gallon, so it's half barrel batch, and we only made 72 bottles. So I'm very glad that you're getting a chance to try it, because we weren't really even sure if we weren't sure if we'd be able to really send it out or what we wanted to do with it. But since it's batch one, you kind of have to invite some people to the dance floor so that it's so that it does kind of ignite maybe some of that intrigue, so that maybe more people want to try it. And that's kind of what we're thinking about.
Right. And this is a style I've never had before. Being celiac since I was 12, I can only try beer styles that I can find or make myself gluten-free. Let's see.
True.
Until I've got, such a professional studio set up with my lighting.
Yeah, well, at least I can see your face. I mean, the backlighting, you sometimes expect that that's gonna
Yeah.
So the forward light.
Christmas tree over there.
Right, I've got a lot of overhead lighting because I'm sitting in my kitchen here, so I could probably do a better job of lighting the room.
Well, I'm sure if I cut the Christmas tree off, the camera would adjust and show me a little better, but it sets the mood.
I like that it's a Hollister shirt, right? You're talking to somebody from
Right.
California. You get your Hollister T-shirt on. I love that. That's very metro of you. I like it.
Yeah, the head just stays there nicely.
That's impressive. Yeah, I like it. And you had a good beer pour on it. So yeah, I know it was a good honest pour. It wasn't like you were like.
I've had to do that with beer sometimes, just to get enough head on it.
That's true. I think that sometimes there is a little bit of that goes into it, right? We've done some pours on our Instagram for Divine Science, and you're holding a camera while you're like pouring it, and you're not tilting the glass or any sort of other
right
pouring. Like we've had people literally comment like, "Oh, I remember pouring my first beer."
You gotta tip the glass, you don't get any foam.
Yeah, right. It's
or
like,
as much foam or whatever. It's like, oh, come on. But it looks cool
a little
on
bit
Instagram.
Right. Well, I mean, if you get to our hazy, I mean, I don't want to jump the gun or anything, but one thing that I've noticed personally is that with the triple dry hop, at least this time, and we didn't, residency times are always a consideration for any brewery, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we wanted to make sure we had hazy for one of our soft openings. So it did go into keg and can relatively quickly, right? When the first couple pours, and still some of them right now, even in the tap room, have like green foam, right? Or tinted green, right? It's not like all the way green. Like there is still so many hot particles in suspension in that beer that it gives a little bit of a green tint to it.
Are you rushing?
So I don't know if you get that. Right? Green beer. Beer is salad. Beer is salad.
Beer is salad. Come on. I've got my first attempt at brewing a lager, and I brewed it exactly a week ago. And I mean, a lot of times I'm pushing stuff to a keg after a week. And so now I'm like, okay, you got to let it sit. Just let it sit, Brian. Just let it sit.
Well, I think a lot of it comes down to clarity, right? Is that if your beer drops clear in 20 days and it tastes like it should, then it's good to go, right? I've said this before on our tasting show, Baking and Brewing, at the homebrew scale, which is that lager specifically, I guess at least in terms of my opinion as a home brewer who likes to drink lagers, is that if the beer tastes the same on day 18 as it does on day 30, you ran the risk of going 12 days of missing great tasting beer.
That's true.
So as long as it has the elements that need to be there, specifically that clarity, I found that more mature versions of certain lager yeasts, I have been somewhat successful in repitching in glass, not in plastic, but in glass with lager yeast. I've been successful at repitching certain yeasts, like the Munich from Mangrove and the 3470.
Yeah.
And I found that when I do that repitch, maybe not the second time, but the third and fourth, and probably till the yeast is done, I found shorter and shorter lagering periods because of how fast that yeast was either falling out or other elements, as in the taste, was already there. Oftentimes, primary fermentation would also be shorter as well, with a more And maybe it was just that fact that it got to the right level of quantity, right? The quality side of the viable bacteria was or not bacteria, but yeast was at the level that it should be to do its work quickly. And it's so funny because, like, you know, even when and I guess I segue here to talking about the book, because that's been such a huge part of my life for the last like year and a half, is that, you know, it really has become a very strong labor of love because of how new a lot of the findings that we are coming up with are, right? Is, you know, I've had to basically create a whole appendix in response to the you know, the data points that we got back from the UC Davis research, right? Which, so for anybody who is not aware of this, I've already told a lot of people about this, but I've sent about 12 different styles of brewing, you know, basically 3 different types of mashes. One that's 100% millet, one that's 100% rice, and one that's a equal parts mixture of rice, millet, and buckwheat. And did a couple different styles of mashes with each one, right? There was 6 performed with millet, there was 4 performed with rice, and then there was 2 performed with the combination of the 3 grains. And that was really actually more of a time constraint than anything else, right? Is that it takes a time to, first of all, do all those different iterations, because they're not typically able to do that many on one day. And then, you know, you have to get it to them. Then they have to, you know, get the time to actually do the research, which is NMR research, which I believe is magnetic resonance is the last 2. I'm nucleic or something of that nature. And so you're able to see in like a parts per million context, glucose, maltose, maltotriose. And then they also gave out the gravity reading as well. And some of the findings have been really crazy. And I don't want to give anything away, but I do want to build that excitement that there have been some stuff that we're seeing that's really crazy, right? It's just different mashes, different batches. I think a lot of things have to really go under a lot of, you know, I kind of want this to be the first step, and hopefully getting the home brewing community and other commercial brewers to, you know, depending on what system they have, recreate some of these mashes, and then let's test what their readings are on certain stuff, you know, given specific grain.
Well, and then especially their end results, you know, the flavors, how does it affect the body, head retention, and
we're not even able to get to there yet, right? Because, you know, in order to do that, you'd have to be sending samples throughout the process and getting timely feedback, right? Especially if you are not filtering yeast out, right? That's its own consideration. I mean, like, there's been, you know, incredible amounts of research done on just getting a beer into a can, but what about a gluten-free beer in a can too, right? I mean, I think there's a lot of factors that we haven't even really investigated as a brewing community, and that's where a lot of the that inspiration to get it going and say, hey, how do we make informed beer as gluten-free brewers, right? Do we know what we're putting in solution when we do the things we do, right? Like, yeah, the rising step mash with Andean ceramics is heavily popular. I have had access to some of the survey data that was conducted by Zero Tolerance, and it's like a staggering number of gluten-free brewers prefer that. At least I'd have participated in this survey. But is that putting the right stuff in solution that you want based on the beer you want to make? Right? Is it better to use a different cocktail? Would a single infusion with ceramics do just as fine, or does it not do just as fine? Or does it do fine for a pale ale and not for a stout? Or does it do well for a Belgian style, but not for this or that? And so that's where the investigation of maltose, glucose, and maltotriose becomes so important, right? Because when you hear people like Jason Yergers talking about, oh, well, this yeast does not digest maltotriose, or this one doesn't do it as well, or however you want to slice and dice that apple, you're looking at whether or not you are actually achieving style profiles, right? And so that's even more important when you're looking at, going in and competing too, right? Because even in the gluten-free category, you have to name the style correctly that your beer actually adheres to, or you will either get docked on points or not even get to be counted as part of the beers, right? There's years that I've heard of years where 43 out of 45 beers were, either not podium worthy, or like there was only 2 medals awarded, which means that they didn't even see somebody as having a beer fit enough to be considered a bronze medal category in that respective judging, which is crazy. Like 43 out of 45, that's staggering, right?
Yeah.
And I think there is a little thing called style creep going on, right? Where, just because you set out to make a lager, blonde, whatever it is, does it really adhere to that category? If you get a chance to try the blonde ale on the show, in many ways, I would say that beer is more of a cream ale than it is a true blonde.
Okay.
The corn note in it, right? The fact that it is heavily clear, almost as though it is lagered, right? Just a lot of those considerations. Sometimes there is a little bit of that creaminess that comes from the corn that's used, the organic malted maize from grouse malting and roasting. So a lot of whimsical and fun things, but as brewers, there's what you make, and then there's what sells a lot of times too, right?
What
there's a
sells,
reason why
changing the name can make a huge difference. And
there's a reason why there's multiple breweries with multiple IPAs on the market, right?
Yeah.
IPA is still one of the top dominating categories in craft beer, so you almost got to do it.
Yeah, you can brew a new IPA every other week. If you could brew an IPA a day and make them all different.
Well, I mean, hops
just by changing the hops around.
Right, hops are like the new random berries with antioxidants that keep coming out in the health magazine like every other week. Oh, we just turned over another rock and we found some berries underneath it, so we think you should try it.
Yeah, they've got all these antioxidants that are great for you.
Oh my god, so many antioxidants.
Oh, this is just delicious.
Awesome. Yeah, we're probably going to do a fair amount of bottle releases hopefully this year. We've got an ambitious schedule. I think we can do it, especially if we only do like 72 bottles each run. That's like a sustainable number, right? 6 boxes of bottles, okay, right? But if we're talking about 600 boxes of bottles, I don't know. But
yeah, that's a lot.
6 boxes of bottles, I think I could do it. I think I could do that. So we want to do like a cherry double for February in Valentine's Day. We want to do some sort of like porter, like maybe an imperial porter with like cake in it for St. Patty's Day. And then we want to do some sort of, I'm still figuring out the details for April, right? Because there's a lot of stuff that happens in April, right? There's typically Easter that happens in April. So it might happen in March. I actually haven't investigated that. But then there's also like Earth Day, which is a big one in April. I think that one's also near and dear to our heart as Divine Science Brewing. Mother Earth, right? So everything that we do as a brand is it features sacred geometry and the divine feminine, right? So probably something that it could be related to, Gaia or Mother Earth or something of that nature. But then there's also 420, right? You know what I mean? So we have to potentially have a consideration. Yeah, the stoners out there, they still have a place in all this. In thinking of the book, Brewers Publications actually just recently came out with a marijuana in beer book. So anybody that's interested in dabbling in that should definitely go pick up a copy. Also, shameless plug, you can pre-order the gluten-free brewing book that I'm writing with Brewers Publications on their website. So they always like to see that when people sign up early. It helps them understand how many copies to actually print. And
Yeah.
that's very nice when we are thinking about conserving paper. We don't want to overprint or underprint, right? And it, you know, typically with the way that supply and demand works in that printing business, you have to wait like 6 months before you can actually get like an actual print run scheduled and actually executed. So,
Yeah.
So we really appreciate anybody that's at the place where they can go and do something like pre-buy a copy for that book.
And the link will be down in the comments or
Awesome. Yeah,
description or something. Maybe I can figure out how to like put the link right there.
Right?
That's the YouTube thing
like,
people do.
How do those YouTubers do that?
Or maybe it'll be over here. I don't know. I'll put some links.
Right.
I am not the technologically inclined one.
Right. Fair enough. No, neither really am I. I kind of stumble along as I go. We want to do some stuff that's, you know, because we have some space on some of these cans, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that we're thinking about doing something like, you know, I guess in the last 2 years, those QR codes really kind of came back into the fourfold of things. And so we're thinking about doing something like putting like a QR code for our newsletter or other stuff like that, right? Because, you know, just because you don't live locally to the tap house doesn't mean that there's stuff that you wouldn't want to get your hands on, right? Like a bottle releaser, right? Because we're most likely never going to release those to Bevmo or Total Wine, just because we can't fulfill first of all, the time that it takes to put the beer in the system. And then second of all, if you only have 72 bottles and there's already like 84 Bevmos in California,
they don't even all get one.
Right? I'm like splitting bottles and I can't do
that. Yeah, I mean,
cut the baby in half.
How do you cut a glass bottle in half and keep the beverage in?
Yeah. That would be interesting to actually have like half corks and half bottles. I can just see it now. People are like, wait a minute. Oh, it looked like it was a whole bottle on the shelf. I only got a half bottle.
But then you get a half bottle of like, you know, year one and a half bottle of year two. Mixy mix.
Hey, like that idea. That's a good one.
Right? Marketing, you know. I mean, the bottles would probably cost a ton of money to have custom made, but you know, it's okay.
Yeah, I mean, you know, more power to the glass blowers out there, man. I wouldn't even know where to start with that. So
oh no. That's when you call the bottle company and you're like, this is what I want. Make it happen, please.
Basically.
Here's a blank check.
Can you get close to this?
Right?
Exactly. So yeah, so you're gonna try to do this regularly? You're trying to do your show often? What's your plan?
I'm trying to do about one a month.
That's fair. Yeah.
Interview and because I'm now going to be putting these all up on the YouTube. I feel it's a better platform to for people to be able to go back and watch it, you know, because when you do the live, you get maybe 20 people that come on and see it. And I really, from what I've seen, you don't get a lot of replays. You know, a couple of people. And it's so I'm like, you know, I want to put this somewhere that, you know, in 6 months when someone hears about Divine Science because they're new to gluten-free or they're new to California and looking for gluten-free beer,
true,
you know, they'll be able to come find your interview and learn more about your brand and the beers that you have. And then especially when we get into, you know, brewing techniques and stuff like that, you know, so home brewers can jump on there and be like, oh, I want to see how to do the rising 3-step mash, or, you know, I want to see how to do Bob's, you know, whatever your new mashes that you figured out with in your book.
Yeah, the falling step.
Right, the falling step, the
Yeah.
rising step, this step,
Single
this,
infusion.
right, this mash that he talked about. I want to see him do it because a lot of people, and especially when you're new to brewing, it's hard to really wrap your head around. Okay, what the fuck are they talking about?
Decantation mash? What's a mash?
Right? What's a mash now?
Is that
I know
that
mashed
Korean
potatoes.
War 70s show, MASH?
Oh man, it took me 6 months to figure out like all these different things that are like, yeah, so you mash the sweet potatoes in with blah blah blah. And I'm like, what do you mean you put it in the mash?
The
I
monster.
make mashed sweet potatoes. And then I just put marshmallows on them and ate them. Never got into
That's a great idea. I definitely want to do a probably for next holiday season. I want to do a sweet potato with marshmallows, and probably some sort of maybe a nut, right? Because I've seen it, or with brown sugar, right? I think that's always a good idea.
The brown sugar.
Do that in a beer. That would be tasty as hell.
I wonder how candy cat mushrooms would work with that. Give it that.
Yeah, well, if you're trying to avoid hint. I think it really depends on, what you're setting out to use yeast wise, right? Certain yeasts do put off some really interesting flavors when they're stressed. Right. And so you adding a sugar like that would really help that. Or even like doing like something that's a little bit off the beaten path, like a molasses, or like sweet potato pumpkin or something of that, right? Like adding a couple different kinds of things, right? Just kind of not just to check the boxes, like, come on, give me a break.
Right. But to pull those flavor experiences.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Because I think that, oftentimes pumpkin is really more associated with the spices than it really is even the actual squash itself. Right. And so that is something that is kind of cool is can it actually contribute enough of a flavor, right? I mean, I wonder if you get more from the sweet potato, right? There's so many questions that abound.
For sure. I know I've seen people make sweet potato pie instead of pumpkin pie. And the claim is that it pretty much tastes the same.
There's some similarities. I'd say that at least with the purple sweet potato, I definitely get a lot more of those sweet potato notes. Somebody just closed the door and woke the dog up.
Oh, puppy.
I don't know if you heard that little yelp in the background.
Oh, yeah, I heard the yelp.
Oh my gosh, he was like on his back, like, oh. Oh my gosh. Let me
candy cat mushrooms are supposed to give what is it, like a maple syrup sort of flavor. So like, if you wanted to pull that brown sugar, which is sugar with molasses, kind of just a little bit of candy cat mushroom just to give a little bit of that maple syrupy, complex kind of caramelized sugar flavor that actually would be stable and like stay in the beer and not ferment out.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that's interesting. I think that even when I have used maple syrup in a beer, I have retained some of that. I think it's just there's also other elements, right? I think that finishing gravity oftentimes has more of a factor in whether or not you perceive that taste because it is so associated with the high level of sweetness that it possesses. Well, I learned something new recently. I was at a wedding and I met somebody from the Northeast, and he's actually the father of the groom. And he sat with me at dinner and was just chatting my ear off about brewing, which was really fun. But he also was talking about making maple syrup, which you actually like 60 gallons boils down to basically like between 1 and 6 gallons, depending on how thick you want it. Right. Which is a massive factor.
It's a boil off.
It basically is a boil off. You are basically brewing maple syrup when you make maple syrup. And so that just, first of all, fascinated me to my core. Because you don't know until you know, right? Like It's like the Matrix. You go to the store, you see it on the shelf, you decide which price you want to pay for what brand, and then you walk out of the store with maple syrup. That's literally the story of it.
Yeah.
But to really understand, like, how, I mean, that's got to be a massive amount of just energy cost just to make 1 pint of maple syrup as a large brand, like at scale, right? So I think about, when, it used to be 5 gallons of beer and now we're talking 600 gallons of beer, right? And so that is a lot of energy utilization just to boil for that long, right? We only boil for an hour in beer, right? Which maybe you increase the gravity by however that factor of boil off is, but you are literally going from like 60 to 1. That is hours, like a day long of just having either a gas-fired heating element or an electrically powered heating element on, right?
Or if you want to really do it right, you have to do it with wood.
True.
That's the right way to do it.
Yeah. And what is the carbon footprint of that, right?
Oh, right.
Everybody's obsessed with carbon footprint nowadays. And it's like kind of interesting to think, right? There's people that are against like the crypto and all these other things just because of that, right? And you're like, wow, okay, that is something to think about. How do we, and that's kind of the cool thing about when you look at grains like millet or rice, right? Is, rice grows in soils that barley basically can't, right? And millet it can grow in arid climates and requires 1/10 of the water that barley requires to grow.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I think that's some of the things that are really cool is, when you look at millet, in America, at least, it's basically a feed crop. It's really never really been a staple crop.
Right.
That's something that was really interesting. I spoke to this guy named Dr. Fasano, right? And he's somebody who's done a lot of the groundbreaking research on celiac disease itself. And one of the things that really stuck out to me in my conversation with him is how much and how much he emphasized, not necessarily how much he used it. He used it a couple times in conversation, but it wasn't like he was spamming the word. But he used the word staple, and he emphasized that word because of how ubiquitous wheat and barley and rye are within not just our American culture, but European culture, a lot of North African culture, Middle Eastern culture, and now it's really made its way as a staple into Asian culture. It is basically the world over a staple crop. And so it is really hard to, think outside of that reference of, of the mind, is that it is so like bread is wheat, right? Beer is barley. Right, that is so hard to break that convention. That's I think one of the things that's so interesting as part of the journey as a gluten-free brewer is accepting that you can make beer from just about anything that has carbohydrates.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Just because it's gluten-free, it's not carbohydrate-free.
That's for sure.
Very nice. So yeah, I'm very interested to hear some of your feedback on this beer. As we have updated the hops, we finally used the last of our Willamette contract and have moved on to a new contract. So I'm curious to see if you can detect the hop that is used in this beer now, and what notes that may be different than, say, the last time you tried the blonde.
Oh, now I have to remember something.
Nice.
You do know I have CRS, right?
What does that mean? You short-term memory
Can't
loss?
remember shit.
Gotcha. I'm there a fair amount of times. I'm plagued with what my wife calls a selective memory. So I don't know too much about these selective memories that people talk of. So
I think the hop profile is a little different. Like there's a little more like tip of the tongue sort of dry hoppiness.
Yeah, and there's a little bit of I'd say a little bit more floral note on this, at least this specific batch.
Okay. My nose is dead. It's Michigan. It's January.
I get it.
There's just no getting around it. I can't smell.
Well, hopefully the hazy you can, because the hazy I am very excited about really coming back to bases with that recipe. So yeah, so we updated the hop bill to be Cascade after the Willamette contract ran out, and so I kind of like that floral note that it gives to this beer in conjunction with an earthy tone, which is more characteristic of a Midwest Cascade as opposed to a Pacific Northwest Cascade. And for me, I personally notice more of in Pacific Northwest Cascade. I notice more of a citrusy grapefruit as kind of leading with that hop, and more of a more of those tones that I mentioned previously, the earthy and floral notes that I get from more Midwest Cascade.
Yeah, and it's always fascinating how the region that the hop is grown in makes a difference. And I am getting that it's a little more, I mean, because they're, it's very subtle in this beer. The hops are subtle, as they should be. But as you're talking about the, herbal, earthy sort of, I definitely got it. I picked up like, that's what I'm tasting. Kind of like when we were talking about one of the beers from Dos Luces, and I forget how I described it, but you described it as bubblegum. And it's like, you said that, I was like, that's what it tastes like. It tastes like that bubblegum that comes in baseball cards.
Yes, very much like the Big League Chew, or the Bazooka.
Yeah,
for sure.
Which I haven't had in 30 years. So
that's one of the things that I think is the coolest about having gone the route of doing tastings, and like recording myself while doing tastings, is how much beer, and I just watching myself play back, right? Because I've had to edit a lot of these videos into YouTube content format, and you end up replaying yourself talking a lot, and it is really interesting because of how much these sensory experiences of beers and things of that nature are so tied to our pasts and our childhood memories, or our teenage memories, or I remember this at this time, and it's the only time that I've ever had that experience, but it is still so present in this beer, and I'm taken back there with every sip, right? And that makes it so special, I think, and so worth savoring, right?
I love the malty character in this.
I love it when you
soft.
Yes,
what's that?
It has a very, it is. It's not trying to go too malty. I'm not trying to go too dry. I'm trying to find somewhere in the middle where there's optimal drinkability.
Yes. Very drinkable. It's got enough malt, character to it that I'm happy to sit and sip it kind of slowly. I don't want to sit here and just chug it down.
True.
There's a couple of blondes I've had where they tasted watery a little. This doesn't taste watery. It tastes like a full strength blonde.
Very nice. Yeah, that's something that I've gotten feedback on, is that they're like, how is this 4%? It feels like it has more. It's, it has full flavor despite the fact that it is relatively lower in ABV than your average beer. And that's, I'm definitely very pleased with that. I think that the blend that we've gotten down of using both blue and yellow corn, we've really nailed that after having done this beer so many times. But then that mixture with, we have a couple different kinds of rice in this beer, some dehusked rice as well as some husked rice, and then some pale millet, and then a little bit of some other character millets, as well as I think we do a little bit of a dusting of raw millet as well. And I think there's something about that texturing of all those different malts and flavors kind of harmonizing together that really makes that really fun experience, even in a beer that is not like our IPA, which is almost double the ABV.
Right. Yeah, your third contact.
Yes.
What's that? It's like 7.6.
That was the first couple
think.
batches. That was the first
Okay.
couple batches, out around 7.5, almost to 8%. And then we were like, well, I guess that's a lot more efficiency than we expected. So I'd really set out to brew us, like, maybe topping out around 7%. Part of that reason was because when we were formulating that recipe, the contract brewer already had relationships with Disneyland, and part of their process as putting your beer in a glass involves what its ABV is, and if it is above 7%, they put it in a smaller glass. And I wanted people to be able to still have a pint,
Right.
and so that's where we really tried to dial it in to be just under 7%, so that retailers and vendors like that wouldn't create a situation where the customer feels like they're getting less.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also selfishly driven, right? Like, I want to be able to have a pint of IPA and not like a small person. That's just my own personal preference.
Well, you'd rather sell two pints to someone instead of one, because after one, they're laying down, going to sleep.
And I respect that, right? And so it's also a little bit of that from that aspect as well, that you can have more than one or two, depending on your body mass,
Right.
and still be at a reasonable level, not be over the top. I know myself personally, I usually stop after my third IPA in the night, and that's probably one too many at that point. So
I definitely find myself gravitating towards, especially with my own brewing, going for lower ABVs. Just like, I'd rather be able to sit and have 3
I would agree
than one and be like, whoa.
I need to take a break. Can I take a lap?
Right.
Oh my gosh, yeah, no, true. I mean, and that's one of the things that's cool, but also tough with craft, is there is this tendency to want to try to throw the kitchen sink at every beer you make.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, especially when you look at the blonde, the blonde came out about a year or more after we had already been brewing just the IPA for that first year. And so, I was brewing some home brews, but I was brewing a lot less home brews, given the time considerations and everything like that. And so, I was drinking, the low fills and of the IPA, but still, like, getting pretty toasted. And I'm like, hey, I need a beer that, if I'm going to be drinking the low fills and the rejects, that doesn't get me too sauced on a weekday night,
Right.
And that's really kind of
a nice dinner beer, something almost table beer,
I would agree. And
something you can have. You have one while you're cooking, one while you're eating, and
then you can still stand up after dinner,
right? The next morning, you still remember what you ate for dinner.
Fair. So yeah, so that's a lot of bit of what I would say inspired that recipe formula. I had tried and tested it once or twice with that grain bill. I actually brought a early rendition of the blonde to HomebrewCon 2019 when I did the seminar out in Rhode Island, and there was a lot of really good reception from a lot of the brewers that did end up trying that bottled version of that beer out there. And so yeah, I had a lot of motivation to kind of see it all the way through.
I love it. It's an excellent beer. I think of any of the blondes I've had, it's, I think, the best. The one I would pick of them all.
You're sweet.
I'm just honest.
I appreciate you saying that. Thank you.
So what else is Divine Science working on, especially for, like say taproom type stuff?
Oh yeah,
Interesting ingredients you're going to work with, things that are sort of maybe outside the box a little.
True. Yeah, I definitely want to get into doing a lot of different stuff, right? So whatever that is, just I guess trying to push the envelope. There's a lot of beers that we haven't even been able to brew yet as a brewing companies, right? So we want to do a couple different Belgian styles, right? From wit all the way to triple and quadruples, and then I think that the market in California is missing a red ale. So we're thinking about potentially, in the years to come, adding a red ale to the lineup in some fashion, whether that be just store releases or just taproom releases. And then we want to do some different fruited stuff, whether those be saisons or pale ales or IPAs. I think I also want to try to figure out a method to do some mixed style beers, like a sour IPA or a this or a that. I think there could be some really fun things like that we'd like to release. I also want to do a couple different renditions of Berliner Weisses. So like, got a couple ideas around that, and we'll try to get. We'll also try to get some sort of a light lager into 12 packs. So that's something that we're.
Oh, that'd be nice.
We've been really trying to figure out a way to do that and do that at a cost affordable mark, as well as, not just affordable to us, but also, of course, that downstream would be to the customer. Right. Something that I'm not trying to, bet the farm on this type of a beer, but I think that the market, since it has been exposed to things like seltzers and other things of that nature, I think some sort of a craft 12-pack gluten-free beer is been long awaited. And I don't think there's very many brands that are even, it's tough to do it, first of all, right? Because, you get it into a box, and what if one of the can pops? That whole box is basically sacrificed, depending on who you sell it to, right? Like Total Wines, they'll take it out of the box and they'll put it on the single shelf, right? So you have one chargeback. But at Bevmo, that's a 12 can chargeback, right? Which sucks. Same with your larger retailers, right? Like your Whole Foods, that's also a chargeback. The Albertsons or the Pavilions, Kroger's, all those, also a chargeback. So you've either got to nail how it's packaged, or you have to get creative with how it's packaged. So there are some of those hurdles that are those unforeseen variables that the customer's like, hey, yeah, why isn't there a this? Executing it is a completely different story, right? And do you put it in a regular can? Do you put it in skinny cans, 12 ounce, 16 ounce? Not. Are we going to put out in a 19? Those larger ones that you see. I mean, we haven't even really kind of answered a lot of those questions too before we made the beer. So that's the thing that you've kind of got to figure out, is not just the recipe, which we've got a couple ideas and we've done one or two at the smaller level, but that changes when you scale it, and then it also changes when you plan on packaging it. So there are a lot of those considerations that we're still answering right now.
Sort of the Divine Science version of Bud Light.
Well,
I feel like there's a place for that. And Redbridge doesn't fill it because
it's there. It's definitely, you can definitely tell that it is a Bud rendition of a beer, which is actually, in terms of brand and brand recognition, that is potentially the smartest thing that ABI did when releasing Redbridge. Is that there is a very large macro lager feel. And so that's, I think, the thing that we're still also debating is do we want the beer to have that sort of a vibe, or do we also still want to have that unique craft taste to it?
Right.
So that's I would welcome feedback in the comments, right? As you look to a beer that you would go out and buy a 12 pack or a 24 or a 30 rack of, what needs to be there? Is it like a Natty Light? Are you just sacrificing the flavor for the cost, or do you want a full flavored light lager, right? I think that's a huge element. That's a big thing for that. Yeah, I mean, you look at some of these. I think Han Ultra Crisp is one of the inspirations for this beer, which is a all rice light lager that got released some years ago in Down Under.
Yeah,
and there's been mixed feedback. I've seen some people who are like over the moon about this beer, not only just because it's gluten-free and they can drink again, but I really love the light taste. I love the this about it. I love the that. And then there's some people that are like, this tastes like the brewer set out to remove all taste. And so when you get feedback like that, as somebody who is a brewer and you read that, you wonder, okay, what considerations need to be made in order to get this beer to the customer and get it to them at the price that they like, in the style of packaging that they like, X, Y, and Z, right?
yeah.
So it's just a different question, right? Like when you're a brewer, you're like, when you're a home brewer, you're like, oh, I wanted this, so I made a this.
Right? Hey, I'm homebrewing. I want to make a triple white chocolate jalapeno habanero cake.
Yeah.
Keep
going. Is it double dry hopped or is it triple dry?
Oh, it's quadruple dry hopped with hemp and.
Yeah, right. In fact, you should turn the can upside down before you pour it to make sure you get ample leaf material in your glass.
Right. you got to get those that hop or the what do you got the yeast that settles out. You got to shake it a couple times.
It's really
got to be on nitro.
You have to swish it in between your teeth and then like blow it out your nose and then drink it again.
The other night, my kids were making fun of me. They're like, and my dad was like, "Yeah, you like take the snort the foam. It smells like."
That is actually 100% accurate.
Yes, it is.
I think your daughter's onto something.
Because I told him, I'm like, you guys need to make a roasting video. Just roast me.
Right.
It'll be funny.
That'd be fantastic.
It'll get 7 views.
It tastes like the pear from the orchard down the street from where I grew up.
It reminds me of running shoes and summer barbecues.
I get a large formaldehyde. It smells like baseball that freshman hit me in the face.
It smells like baseball mitt leather, not shoe leather, not belt leather. Baseball mitt.
Catcher's mitt.
Catcher's mitt, not outfielder's mitt. They smell totally different. Are you fucking stupid?
Right.
You're ruining craft beer because you use this hop. Oh, it's been good having you on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks for having me on. You trying to go to the hazy, or are we just how many beers do we have time for left?
One more.
Let's do it.
Because that's 3.
Yeah.
Right.
Show you how to do this, son. Oh, ayo.
Ayo. All right. So now I have particle haze.
Very nice. There you go. I think if I were to name her, it would probably be Aurora. So trying to create names for these. We might actually try to figure out some sort of,
so
right. We're thinking about potentially figuring out a way to create like either an app-based D&D game or a board-style D&D game for these could be like in-game players, or these could be the characters that you start out with. I feel like you kind of need to be, you need to have multiple genders per se to do a full-on D&D game. I don't know. It's tough. I'm still figuring it out. So cheers to that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. So as you can see, that beer is opaque.
Yes, this is the color of orange juice.
It is, yes, and it is one of our very first points where we were at a place at a brewery where I could, as the head brewer, say, "Damn the cost! Let's make this beer." And it's something that we're incredibly proud of because it is very hard to say that at the commercial level, right? Because the cost is everything, you know. And we're really very excited with the response that we've seen in the stores because this is by far and away our most expensive beer to put on the shelf. I think the dry hop alone is something like $1,000 just for the dry hop itself. So, and that's not counting the nearly $4,000 of grain that it costs to go in this beer.
Right.
So, yeah, there's a lot of considerations that we've made to make sure that it is the optimal drinking triple dry hopped IPA that it is.
And it is very hazy. That is, your lighting's better than mine.
Yeah, I know. I was noticing that out.
Super opaque.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's so opaque that in your light, it almost has a green complexion to it.
I promise you, it's not green in person, but
yeah, there is still so
huge
much
hop aroma.
Yeah, I really love the juicy, fruity. I get a lot of tropical as well as like
tropical mango, grapefruit.
I get a little bit of stone fruit too on the nose, and then I think that as you drink the beer, there is a lot of those tropical citrus flavors that do get unlocked, but then there is that almost peach note that comes out, and I think that's something that makes this beer so fun to drink. Is there is a lot of that juiciness, but it is almost this kind of complex juiciness that that changes, right? You know, there's the initial flavor and aroma that you get on the nose and the upper palate, and then you have the drinking experience of it, and then there is, of course, that retro nasal, which I really think rounds them all out. And that's personally where I've gotten the pineapple gusher with peach inside of it. That's been my best descriptor for this beer.
It's got a nice, it's a bit of an acidic, like kind of grapefruity, especially like right now. You could, after you swallow, kind of finishing, ending.
True, and then there is, of course, that extra dank note that I think the dry hop element that you can still experience. This beer was canned on December 29th. So I think probably one of the, I think it's about as fresh as you can get it in the can.
Right. I mean, that's the 29th. It's the 9th. It's the 9th now. So that's 10 days.
It's 10, 11 days old. I think that this beer potentially gets to its best, like optimal experience around day 23. And that's just the average, what I've noticed in a lot of IPAs. There's something about because right now the hops are still so fresh and still in just held in suspension that it does diminish the head retention, right? I was looking at your beer. I could see, you could see my beer. Yeah, there's a couple bubbles, right? Mm-hmm. It's not like you don't have any bubbles, but the head retention, you look at a beer like the Milsner that I was drinking earlier, right? I think even your blonde had head retention better than this beer.
Might have. I would have to look back. I wasn't paying that much attention at that point.
We'll have to
I wasn't
go back
sitting here with the stopwatch.
We'll fix it in post. But yeah, I mean, you know, as I mentioned before, you know, I think that, you know, when I'm setting out to make a craft beer, that is a huge element that I think you can't overlook as the brewer, right? You do
Right.
have to be cognizant of, are you, and I guess maybe it's just a gluten-free brewer, you know, you have a lot of people that are people are brutal out there, right? I mean, you could talk to a lot.
They're horrible.
Well, some beer buyers are like, I don't want to purchase it if it hasn't won an award. Where you're like, I mean, I will probably enter into competition soon, but it's a different consideration when you're using a contract brewer, right? Because
Right.
you can't take all of the accolades as the brew house yourself, right? You have, since they are technically the brewer of record, they also get mentioned in that award. And while we really appreciate the work that they're doing, we want it to be a Divine Sciences award, right? So there's things like that, you know, and you know, obviously you look at some of the brew houses that are winning some of these awards, they're doing it in I learned from Alan recently at Holiday Daily that they just recently medaled in the Oktoberfest category, not the gluten-free category, the Oktoberfest category.
Nice.
Right. And this is where gluten-free is now. I'm literally talking to you and I had chills up and down my spine saying that, because nothing excites me more than that prospect. That yes, okay, we love that we get our own category. I think that's wonderful. I really appreciate the brewing community for having done that. But is it necessary? I don't know. I mean, if it tastes like your average barley beer, then why do we need our own category? And that's,
Right. That's one of those things where when I enter, you know, as a home brewer, I'm like, okay, do I go into, you know, the 31A alt grain category, or do I go for, you know, just pale ale or whatever, you know, the style is?
Yeah.
I really want to do both.
Yes, I think
mixed results.
I want to do that too, right? Because but most competitions you can't enter the same beer in two categories. Some you can. So it just depends. You got to keep an eye on it.
But you could enter one and your wife could enter one.
That's a good point.
I mean,
you know, I guess you're right. I mean, that's a consideration. You know, you don't often think about that, but also you have to remember that there is a cost element to it too.
True.
Some of these competitions are like $75 or more per entry, right, at the commercial level.
Well, especially
right? So
commercial, that's going to be a different.
Yeah, and that's fair.
Story.
They're well within their rights to charge that. I'm not complaining about it. I'm just saying that you're like, okay, well, how much money do I want to spend on just this one competition? So, but yeah, no, I definitely excited to do a little bit more of that. You know, I think that, you know, we've definitely come to a point where, you know, we've gotten a lot of really good feedback from our customers. We've seen a lot of really good feedback for certain flavors. But even still, you know, I think that there is a lot of love for the originals, right? You know, I think that we could try to make all sorts of beer that, you know, out there, but the West Coast IPA, our Third Contact IPA, is to this day still our best seller.
It's a damn good beer. Just tasty.
You know, when I apprenticed at Ghostfish, one of the things that I was exposed to is the fact that there is the beer that you like to make, and then there's the beer that needs to be made. And that's something that really affected how I chose to develop recipes at Divine Science, which is the beer had to be fun for me to make. That just 100%. Like that was it sounds like a very weird requirement and almost an unnecessary requirement. But when I thought of the fact that I'd be brewing a lot of these beers for some time, it had to be fun. I had to want to make that beer, right? And not go, well, we do this because of that, or we do this because of that, or, you know, I think that there was also certain elements, right? It's not like they don't like making the beers that they make, but they put out some really fun special releases at Ghostfish, right? And some of those beers are the funnest beers that they've brewed, right? as opposed to when you actually are at a production level and you are brewing 60, hundreds of barrels of time, however many barrels you are, you set into a thing that achieves this other thing. And that beer doesn't care whether or not you like to make it. It you know, the rent cares whether or not that beer gets made.
Yes.
So
Right. And sometimes the beers that you want to make may not be the ones that sell, and the ones that you're tired of are the ones that are, you know, people are coming over to you know, your brewery to buy cases of
true.
wheat, because
Well,
that's their beer, that's their whatever, their Miller
yeah,
or Natty Light that they want to drink every day with
that's
dinner.
true. And so, yeah, that's the thing is I actually don't mind, you know, that's one of our best selling beers because it is still so fun for me to brew.
Yeah.
So that's, you know, that's just consideration. You know, people can take that however they like, but that's my own personal story with regard to that beer. Still love that beer. One of the things that's really interesting is I was actually looking back on the iterations of that beer that I've done with the homebrew scale. And the first time I brewed that beer, I actually never named it, which is crazy to me. Yes, it's been inspired by other beers, but I never named it. And I went back to that beer when I set out to make this Third Contact IPA and called it Career IPA, which was interesting to me. I just in just terms of looking at who I was and how I thought about things at that point. You know, when you're going like that's 3 years ago now at this point, almost 4 years ago at this point. And you go, it's not even named Third Contact, it's just Career IPA. Because I'm willing to stake my career on that beer.
And it's a solid beer. It's an IPA. It's, you know, I mean, if someone's a barley, you know, a barley drinker, new to gluten-free, and they want an IPA, and they grab Third Contact, they'd be like, "Yep, it's an IPA."
That there you go. Honestly,
you know, and they wouldn't look back. They just be like, "Hey, it's an IPA." They drink it, no problem.
I have the biggest smile on not only hearing you say that, but also remembering the first time that I went to try to get a little bit of feedback at one of the places that was carrying our beer. And I go and I asked the the waitress, completely anonymous. She didn't know that I was the brewer. So right. You know, but sometimes that's the best way to get feedback is just to act like a regular customer. Hey, what do you think about that Third Contact IPA? She's like, you know, it just tastes like a regular IPA to me. And I'm like, technically that could have been seen as a diss if you're an average brewer, right? And that just tastes like a regular IPA to me, not like it's an earth shattering or it changed my life IPA, whatever, blah blah blah. Just tastes like a regular IPA to me. Like that was the best feedback I think I've ever gotten on that beer. So basic. It's so funny to me, right? Because it's like
basic.
Well, little do you know, young ma'am, that that's exactly what I was setting out to do when I made that beer.
Win! Touchdown!
Yes! Tastes like a regular IPA! Yes!
All right. Well, I think we're about running out of time and data. Any last thoughts?
Well, I mean, first of all, thank you again for having me back on the show. Hopefully that says some good things about A, the beer, but B, the quality of the content. So thank you again. Yeah, it's just great to be here. Shout out to everybody who's watching. Thank you so much for your support of our brand. And we can't wait to have you at the brew house. Obviously things are crazy out there right now with a lot of people being sick or being exposed to, COVID-19 and whatnot. We're going to get through it. And we can't wait to hoist a pint with y'all down at the brew house or virtually. Feel free to reach out. And of course, join our newsletter. that is where a lot of the new updates about our flavors and taproom releases and stuff, you will get, prior warning, as it were, as opposed to kind of more day of stuff on our social media. So be sure to go to divinesciencebrewing.com and sign up for our newsletter.
All right. Links there, or there, possibly there, wherever the hell I figure out if I figure out how to put links in places. They'll be down
All of the links
somewhere.
Yes, down below. Yes, and definitely pre-order your copies of Gluten-Free Brewing by your
Gluten-Free Brewing on
Brewers Publication website. So yes, and it is by me, Robert Kiefer, or as you may know me on Facebook, Bob Kiefer.
All right. It's been great, everyone. It's been great having you on, Bob. Thank you. And I look forward to coming out to the breweries someday when I can travel out there.
Oh yeah. We'll have to do a live video, and hopefully we'll have
that'd be fun.
By the time you're out, we'll have all 8 taps pouring, and we'll probably have a couple of different style of bottle of releases available for you to try as well. So I'm very excited to have you out, man.
Sounds great. See you soon.